Today, let's take a look at story. Welcome to the We Are Slam show, where we share best practices, insights, and ideas to help your brand, community, or organization grow. My name is Tyler Kelly, and I'm here with my co-host, Michael T. Johnson. And today, let's take a look at story, the power of story, and how we can affect and build communities and build raving fans, audiences, buyers through this thing that we call story.
Yeah, and story is one of our favorite things to talk about. We know it's kind of a buzzword that people throw around, and a lot of people mean a lot of different things when they talk about story. But the reason we love to talk about story is it's incredibly powerful in the way that it connects humans and connects our emotions and really unlocks a lot of potential in our organizations that are really hard to communicate in other ways.
And if your audience, if your people, your employees, if your community, if they don't know your story, if they can't recite your story, if they're not aware of it, then they're not going to be a part of your community. They're not going to be engaged, and they're not going to align with your values. So today we're going to reveal the 4 types of stories, specifically stories that build a community, that, begin a movement, that kind of bring people together.
The first story that we're going to talk about is the origin story. Now, we all love origin stories. Like every superhero movie, all those things, they all have an origin story. But the reason the origin story is so important is it creates this context for why you, your organization, or your brand even exist. And if a person can't really comprehend why you exist, then it's kind of confusing for them why they should be involved with whatever you're doing.
Yeah. And then, a lot of people think of, okay, I have to talk about how I started the business. And that's not necessarily like what an origin story is. An origin story, in order to be considered, impactful, truth, if you will, it needs to have 3 things. It has to be factual, it has to be emotional, and it has to have some form of ideological truth. If it has these 3 elements, then it doesn't have to necessarily be like word for word, like every minute detail of your origin, right? It just has to have these 3 elements. And so think through like what Simon Sinek says. Start with why. Like, why are you doing what you're doing? And how is that impacting the world or your audience or your community?
And that why will help you align the rest of the things happening in your organization.
So the second type of story is values stories. So these are stories where we share our values. So the challenge that many organizations have, especially as you grow, is maintaining a culture of values within the organization as it grows. So like aligning your teams and team members with culture and with values. And the way to do that is by sharing values stories across the organization. A lot of times people aren't aware of how values impact the organization until they see those values in action. So the way to share values stories is by shining a light on the actions and behaviors within the workplace that are happening that reflect your values.
And I think another reason that values are so important, because values really tell us and tell other people kind of what we believe about the world, or what we believe about the world that we're trying to create with our organization. And a lot of times in marketing, people say like people don't buy things, or they don't buy into your reason for existing on like common interest or because like it's a great product. They buy into it because of common belief. Like they share the same belief about the world that you do. And when somebody connects on that values level, it's incredibly powerful.
So the third type of story is the vulnerable story. And really, as a leader, you want to be vulnerable. You want to share these areas that you wouldn't normally share. You can really begin to drive an emotional impact, an emotional connection with your audience when you're willing to step out on the limb and share something that you might fear would bring rejection.
Right, because we're all human, and humans, we all have the same problems. And if you can kind of humanize your brand, your business, yourself to your audience, then they're going to connect with you on a much real and much more impactful level.
And the thing is, a lot of times we say fear is, a liar, meaning that whatever the thing that you fear is the thing that you probably should be doing. In that moment, you're fearing doing that, in this case, sharing that vulnerable story, because of some perceived outcome that may or may not happen. That's where fear is a liar. And so, what I like to say is any place that you have fear, that is your, mind's way of saying, go this way. And just somehow we've treated that like indicator differently, and said, okay, I'm going to stop and go the other way. When in reality, like anytime you have a fear, just like go towards it. I think they say, what's that famous quote? Like, we'll go in the direction of your fear and fear will disappear, or that's a paraphrase.
Yeah,
but
I think there's a lot of kind of platitude sounding things, but a lot of them are true.
Yeah.
I mean, I feel like we're kind of getting in the personal development type territory, but a lot of times when I have a fear of something, just saying it out loud like makes it lose its power over me.
Yeah.
And then it's like, okay, well, I admitted I was scared of that, and now I can face it, and I'm moving on. So
yeah, totally.
So the next type of story is the personal story. And this may have a similarity to kind of that vulnerability story, but really it's not about you. It's about other people in your organization. Sharing personal stories of people that are involved in all levels of your organization, and maybe even outside of them as well.
Yeah, so when people begin to have an emotional connection with your brand or with your community, with your organization, then at that point, your story is going to become their story. And so when that happens, that's where the magic happens. That's where it's like, okay, this brand is everything that I believe that I am. And their story is my story. My story is their story. We see this with Nike, right? Yeah. With the commercials that they do, and how those just go viral, and like community is built out of those stories.
I think any kind of movement, whether it's a brand, an organization, a community, really, they have this collective story, and that's incredibly powerful.
So the 4 types of story: origin stories, values stories, vulnerable stories, and personal stories. So the power of storytelling, I really think, is undisputed. It's how we connect with people. It's how we build movements. It's how we nurture cultures. And it's something that we really love to do. As a digital storytelling agency, this is what we're all about taking your story, developing it, shaping it, maximizing it in the digital space in a way that communicates with people wherever they are online, and that connects to their stories to really have that impact, to build an audience of raving fans and a community, a movement of people that are one with your brand. If you have questions about this,
go to our website, slamagency.com, and we've got a button at the top of the website that says free consultation. So we can help you explore this idea of story with your organization, maybe help you figure out ways to tell your story better. We'd love to have a conversation and find out what we can do to help your brand or your organization.
And if you have enjoyed the show and you tune in every week, we love those comments. Thank you for leaving the comments. Thank you for asking questions, hitting us up in Messenger, liking, commenting, sharing, subscribing, rating, reviewing, all of the above. Thank you for tuning in. We'll see you next week.
Thanks for watching. If you like what you just watched, subscribe, then hit that bell. You'll be the first to be notified when new content goes live. After that, you can watch more videos from Slam Agency. We've picked something we think you'll love.